Hi, I'm Janet Deneef, founder and director of the Ubud Writers and Readers Festival. You are about to hear one of our highlight conversations recorded live for our 2022 festival, which explored the role of the written word in upholding humanity's values and freedoms through our festival theme, Mamayu Hayuning Bawana, Uniting Humanity. So please settle in and let the magic of our 19th festival continue.
Good afternoon, crazies and mental men, and welcome to another edition of We Are Not Normal with your host, the Miles Merrill. So that's Miles, different from kilometers, which are shorter and less imperial. So today, our topic is combating racism, and we have a tradition in Australia of acknowledging First Nations people. I would like to acknowledge that we are on the land of the local Balinese people and acknowledge their culture. Also to give appreciation for their traditions, for their offerings, for their ceremonies, and give thanks to them for having us in their space. We've got a fantastic lineup today. As per usual, the brown people have been invited to talk about racism.
Yeah.
It would be very strange having four white people up here going, hey, I know all about it, I'm going to tell you one. But there should be at least one on the stage that we can sacrifice. But so each of us has a little bit of a relationship to being, I guess, these euphemized terms, these euphemisms of marginalization and discrimination and colonization. And, when we talk about colonization, we're really seeing that play out, for example, with Russia and the Ukraine. So colonization literally is murder, rape, torture, and the taking away of culture and a people's land. And as we see the suffering of the Ukrainians, think also of Britain in Africa. Think also of the Dutch in Indonesia. Think also of Spain in South America. France in Vietnam. All of these various places are basically doing exactly what we're all protesting and aghast at right now. Now, I'm going to introduce just really quickly our panelists. So I'll start all the way over here. We've got Sami Shah, who's based in Australia, and he's a broadcaster for the ABC. He's a writer of various genres of fiction, including urban fantasy, horror. He's also a documentary maker. He has currently on Audible an audio series called The Mist, Missed, which I believe is about Pakistani community in Western Australia, where Sami grew up.
Yeah, it's a crime noir story about a Pakistani family that migrated to Western Australia and then something bad happens.
Great. Well, I'll just do an introduction in turn, and then we'll get straight into the conversation. We've also got Huda the Goddess. She's the current Australian Poetry Slam champion. Her work deals directly with communication with a live audience. So it's mostly freestyle. There is actually a book that she's published, which you can purchase and have her sign after the program. But also a lot of her work is about being Black Muslim woman in Australia, and often not finding herself in spaces where she feels comfortable, and also the feeling that you have to make your audience uncomfortable. So we'll talk to Huda about that. And we've got Felix Nesi, who's from West Timor, and his work has been published and also created as a radio monologue for Indonesian television. He's currently working on a novel, an untitled as yet, but he's also been a recipient of the program at the University of Iowa, where it's a quite lauded program where he's been working on his current manuscript. So a round of applause for our presenters. And I'll start with Felix. We talked a little bit just beforehand about the idea of, I guess, soft censorship.
Yeah.
And the relationship, I guess, between government and writing. How does that play out with your work? Is there a danger of talking about particular topics? Is there serious backlash from government if you bring up particular topics? Not that, don't bring them up here, but obviously.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
What I'm talking about is in Indonesia we have these sentences that always been put in every writing submission, like dilarang menyinggung isu sara, suku, agama, ras. Don't ever talk about the ethnicity, religion. Don't ever menyinggung about the ethnicity, racism and racialism and everything. But the word menyinggung has two meanings. Like the first meaning is menyinggung, offense. Don't be offensive. And the second meaning is talk about. Don't ever talk about. So I think this word is always be confusing among the writers. Like, is the meaning is don't talk about or don't ever offend about that topic. Don't talk it offensively. But it was never ever solved, and people it come again every year. And then Indonesia, we have this reformation in 20 after Suharto, and we always say that there is no censorship. But I think we still have the censorship through that sentences. The sentence exists until now. Like it's everywhere. So when I'm working on my novel, I'm thinking about that sentence. Like sometimes I think that we even made self-censorship because of we know that we don't allow to talk about it. For me it's a little bit hard, and then I just try to write what I want to write, and then I try to looking for a small publisher who can publish it without censor and some kind of that, and then my book's published.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huda, so coming from almost the opposite extreme where almost anything goes in Australia in terms of censorship, how do you feel about this sense of, I guess, responsibility to talk about racism because it's a lived experience for you, but also is it a burden? Maybe that duality of Sami could talk to this as well, but when you just want to write about how the interior of a capsicum looks like a cathedral, but people are like, you got to talk about black.
Politics.
You got to talk about black. Talk about politics.
I think there's not enough space for two black poets in a lot of rooms. And I mean, Exhibit A, look around. I'm the only, you, but in most spaces it's like one black person acceptable. That's the cutoff. The responsibility I have personally is so different to the responsibility being given to every black poet, right? I say the goddess has a responsibility to have a conversation with a stranger's soul and let the truth light. That's my personal responsibility. I'm an educator by trade. I take that duty on, but also as a writer, as an artist, right? I also want to freely speak about my first love story, right? And my curiosity with colors, and I want to be able to examine the dimensions of my existence in whatever way I desire to. But there's an expectation that when I come into a room, I am going to be the political head of the conversation. That I'm going to tell people what needs to be done, what should not be done, and I'm also the spokesperson for every black person existing, right? It's one thing for you to want to hear my story, but it's another thing of you making me the representation of blackness globally. That whatever I say is pinnacle, it is the thing, it's the reference. And it is an emotional, draining process to always have to be political when sometimes you do not want to be. And then also having that expectation, if you meet one very political black poet, that every single one of us is gonna follow and be exactly like that. And a lot of black poets have a process of internalized racism they're working through the pen. So they're learning about blackness as they write about it. So to make them their own intrinsic healers and their own storytellers, and then your educators, is a lot. It's an absolute, it can be such an emotional burden.
And there's also the feeling of combating stereotypes as well. You know, the number of times I say I write poetry and they go, oh, rapping then.
Oh my
And
God.
I'm like, no.
Jesus.
Okay. So I'm also curious with you, Sami, like you writing genre fiction, and we spoke briefly about this just before. Is there also the burden and the pressure to always be representative of culture, even though you just want to go, hey, I'm writing genre fiction, it's got nothing to do with being Pakistani?
Well, I mean, I'm aware of like certain differences and things. Like, for example, in regards to censorship, I'm from Pakistan. I spent 35 years in Pakistan as a journalist and a writer and a comedian in Pakistan as well. And the lines of censorship are very strict there. They're very clear. It's one of the reasons why I can't go back to Pakistan, because I offended the wrong sentiments, and you know, the price for that is my head. You know, it's one of those things. In Australia, the lines of censorship are much less harshly demarcated. You know, there's no death penalty for anything you say. There's a defamation law. It's a legal thing which is abused very often, and I think it's a terrible law that needs to be done away with. But again, like it means financial degradation, not being killed. There are things that society says you can and should not talk about. And that's very different. So that's self-censorship like you were talking about right now, where even if now Indonesia has free speech, there's still the social pressures. So in Australia, for example, you know, disrespecting the Anzacs is something that you should not do and cannot do. And Yasmin Abdul-Majid, who, you know, was believed to have done that, even though I don't think she did, got basically hounded out of the country for it. But also, I'm a comedian. Right? So if you tell me don't say something, I'm definitely going to say it. It's why I got in trouble in Pakistan. It's why I then went on to do 10 minutes about the Anzacs, making fun of them, because why not? Like, if anything is sacred, then I don't like that it's sacred. And I don't like things that are sacred. I don't trust things that are demarcated as sacred. Talking about race is something that now more and more is being treated as a sacred area of conversation. And I don't like that. I like talking about race. I'm from Pakistan. We didn't have racism in Pakistan. We had ethnic racism in Pakistan. You know, Punjabis versus Pathans, and Mahajers versus Sindhis, things like that, which you don't understand outside the Pakistani context. But when you come to Australia, you know, it's more along the traditional lines of black versus brown, brown versus white, you know, everyone versus white, really. And
Thanks.
You know, and you've got all of these kind of different racial conversations that happen. But I like those conversations. I like when they happen. I like when people are uncomfortable, because that means you're having an honest conversation. But the thing I'm noticing more and more is people don't like being made uncomfortable. So there's a whole industry right now. There's 1,000 books if you go online and Google how to be anti-racist, how to not be racist.
Yeah.
And they sell hundreds of thousands of copies to people who already don't think they're racist. No racist is picking up that book and learning from it.
That's what I was going to ask. Who are we speaking to?
Who is that? Exactly. I would much, like when I live in Melbourne, which is, you know, probably, according to Melburnians, the least racist city in Australia, probably. I have had more racist experiences in Melbourne from well-meaning hipsters than I ever did in a country town in Western Australia, where I met horrendously racist people, but they treated me like a human being. They said the wrong things because they were too poorly educated or impoverished or whatever, for a million reasons. They said the wrong words because they didn't know they were right words, but their intentions were better.
Yeah.
Whereas in Melbourne, they'll say the right words, but their intentions are much fouler. And so I don't trust people when they say don't talk about this or talk about this only in certain ways. My first instinct is always like, all right, why do you think that? Why are you saying that? And now I'll hurt you for saying that.
I'm imagining you got a bit of material out of the monarchy recently.
I mean, the Queen stuff, like, I find it interesting, but also, like, part of it is, you know, the way the conversation. The Queen died, and I had all my friends in Melbourne and in Australia going, oh, I'm glad she's dead, and to hell with the Queen. And that. My mother, who's a Pakistani woman in Pakistan, crying her eyes out. all my aunts and uncles in Pakistan weeping and going, not since Diana have we felt so heartbroken. They hate the British because of colonization, but also we've got that complicated relationship with all of these things. So, you know, like I went to a comedy club that night, and there was all these, you know, lefty white guys on stage being like, yeah, to hell with the Queen. And I was like, I don't know, don't say that. I feel bad for my mom now. But that's interesting.
Yeah.
Right? That's complicated. That's interesting. How people have different relationships to different power structures. I find that, for me, speaks to the complexity of people. And I'm worried that the way we talk about these things right now, we're taking the complexity out of the conversation.
Now, is there actually an avenue with your writing where we're speaking to power and we feel we can make a difference? Is that an illusion? Is there, you know, some sort of, you know, capacity of authors and writers and that you feel will actually make a difference to government? I mean, in Indonesia, is that the case? Is there a way for culture and arts to actually impact political change?
I don't really think that governments read books, so
Absolutely not.
but I think we really, Indonesian really should take these discussions up, like everywhere. We have to start the discussion about the racism and everything. Like I went to the Iowa, and one day I'm with my friend, she's white, and then we thought a little boy came up and hand us some money, and then can you buy us beer? And I asked them that, how old are you? And the lady's like, go to school. And the kid's like, you're being racist. And then he told everyone that this lady being racist to me. And I started thinking that this little boy is aware of racism, and he even can manipulate people of that issue. Like the lady don't say anything. She's just like, go to school. And then people start coming, and thanks God we don't get beaten. And then, so when we went back, I started thinking like, we don't have that kind of discuss here. Sometimes we feel bad, like people. We are from the eastern part of Indonesia. We're black, curly, and then we have accent, something like that. And then when we come to Java, Jakarta, we treated racist. And but we feel bad, but we don't know what is that. We don't even know what is that. Why they treat me this way. We don't even know what racism is. Like I just aware of racism like in the university something. In my childhood, I don't really know that issue. So I think the important thing is we have to start to talk about it, to discuss about it, and to solve it. Because we don't allow to talk about so many things. Racism is one thing we don't allow to talk about it.
Huda, do you think there's a collective voice that can come from the arts that can impact political change in Australia and internationally?
Oh man, Australians just lie to themselves. Like I was talking to my friend about this the other day, like the placement and of like literature, right? And historically, if you look at a lot of countries, when war and conflict comes out, the first thing is we censor what people can say, what they can write, their ability to gather, right? Another effect of colonization is people losing language, which is their ability to communicate with each other and exchange things, because our mode of exchanging information is conversation, is language. So there is a power in literature and its ability to drive people who have the ability to act to do so, right? I'm disarmed. Just because I have the ability to write truth in a way that makes people want to listen does not mean I am then the person who's got the mechanics and capability to actually do the thing, right? Because again, most times I'm having an echo chamber with people that already get it. So in most conversations I'm sitting talking about racism, most people know what I'm talking about. Most people relate. Most people understand that. The people who I need to listen to that conversation are not here. The people who have the capacity to make change happen are not here. So my question to myself is like, as a writer, I have the audacity to imagine and let life be breathed out of my speech. I, as a literary mind, have the audacity to imagine. That's it. I then have the audacity to make others imagine with me, right? And then take them on this capability of like, if now we both see it, it must have some ability to be real. How do we create this imaginary solution, right, and make it a reality for ourselves? I, as a black woman, will never really have the power to create the type of rooms that I desire for my safety unless they're all black. That's the truth, right? My job is to create and carve out something where people can envision the world that I think needs to happen. And then those who have the ability to create that need to put action. It's like I'm almost calling for humanity. Like me and my grandmother say, a poem is a call to prayer. A poem is activating somebody's soul to feel you. And I hope that people feel me from an intrinsic place, that creates humanity. Like if we take everything off, I'm just human. And imagine every disparity that I'm talking about, my people going through, is the death of humanity. I'm asking people to see humans in literature. That's all I'm doing. I have the audacity to imagine the possibility of something different. And my call to action is, if you listen to me and you feel me and you got money I don't, make it happen. Because I can imagine it for you, but you have the mechanics to make it happen.
And Sami, innately, creativity and arts can go deeper than opinion, right? You can move an audience and they can walk away going, wow, maybe I am racist. But if you just point at them and say, I'm racist, they'll go, no, I'm not.
You're right.
So, what's been your experience of that?
I like the subtle ways in which writing and the arts, fiction particularly, can create empathy. I always think about, I don't know about policy level. Policy level, the only examples I can think about of literature having an impact has been negative. It's been things like, the Iran reaction to Salman Rushdie, for example, when Midnight Children came out, when Satanic Verses came out, and the fatwa that resulted in, or, the Nazis being influenced by Nietzsche, or something like that. That's not good. When literature reaches a level where it affects policy, sometimes bad things happen, and I think it's because politicians are involved, and politicians are inherently vile. But at the same time, I think about things like, I grew up in Pakistan. I grew up in Pakistan in the 1980s. And it was, and just being very confessional, a homophobic environment. We did not have a very nuanced understanding of LGBTQI issues. And when I watched the movie Philadelphia as a teenager, 15, 16 years old, was the first time I, as an individual, started thinking, I can't hate people for being gay because they're people and it's not a choice, and why would you hate someone for that? But it took a movie to make me think that way, because my school teacher, my parents, my family, the society was telling me, be homophobic. It's against Islam, it's against religion, it's against all of those things. And it took a good movie with Tom Hanks in it to make me think otherwise.
Yeah.
And Denzel Washington.
Oh, come on.
Right.
That makes sense.
But it's the same thing, right? So I didn't, I learned a lot about the world and the complexities of the world sitting in a room in Karachi through fiction, through Stephen King's novels, through Ursula Le Guin's novels, through the writing of Steinbeck, and through everyone from Rushdie to you name it, and Chinua Achebe, all of these writers, they all taught me humanity and empathy. Then I met people who I hope found me to be more humane and empathetic than I would have been otherwise. I don't know if writing and art can change policy, but I think it can change people. Which goes to what you're saying as well, which is basically we need, but I don't know if that should be the goal or ambition of a writer. That I worry about. If a writer or a creator creates something thinking this will change people, it's not going to be a good story. I think the importance and the only loyalty you have as a writer is to story, and to make it a good story and an honest story and a true story, and what happens after that is out of your control.
Facts, absolutely.
Yeah,
I agree.
Thank you. I'm curious from each of you if you have a little example of your work that you can share with the audience so we get kind of an understanding of the work that you do and as related to the topic. Just how the people in the room need to experience some little bit of empathy because we are talking conceptually about creativity and its impact on racism. It'd be fantastic to actually get some of that emotional impact as well. Huda, do you want to kick us off with a little piece?
Of course you would pick me first.
I don't know.
Can I stand up?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally.
How long do I have? You said extract. Does that mean?
Just a
Let's be like
couple of
really
minutes. Just a couple of
specific.
minutes.
Okay, cool.
2 minutes or something.
I'm trying to stand in like the perfect position where like everybody can see me. Has everybody here been to a poetry slam before? Anybody open mic? I'm gonna give you some poetry slam decorum, right? You know, in dance world, you throw shoes, so please don't throw your shoes at me because I will not be dancing. Snaps are an eloquent way to let me know that I'm doing a great job. You know what I mean? I'm gonna share a piece with you. I was back home in Sudan when the revolution took place, and I was standing on the 4th floor of a rental, and I was looking at my city and my country collapse. And I always wanted to write a poem, like in my book, acknowledging what happened in Sudan and the genocide and the continuous fight for survival. And I wrote a story about police brutality and what happens back home. But I rewrote this poem that's not finished because, as Miles said, I'm a freestyle poet, which means I get one line and I finish it on stage. And I want to write a poem about survivors. And I wrote 2 lines that I'd like to finish on stage. I think there are like misrepresentations of what survivors are. And when you think of people who survived war, chaos, loss, grief, there is a sense of awe that comes. And I don't want the awe, I want the yeah, right? I want the oomph and the celebration of their grit and courage. And I think that's the story that needs to be told and vocalized over and over again. So here is my tribute to the survivors globally of chaos, of war, of disparity, people who have lost and still lived, who have been unloved and still loved. This is a story for them. So, yeah. The survivors I know chew on bullets like gum, and I mean chew it until the taste is gone. Chew it hard enough for their jaws to dislocate, leaving a little wiggle room for their ancestors to slip through. The survivors I know have daggers for hands and keep spears in their spinal cords. They're the ones that remind you you are lucky that God is not a woman because he would hold a grudge. So instead he birthed a goddess who holds stories in the palm of her hands and turn her heartbeats into rhythms and teaches you that soil could be our ink where we write revolutions on. The survivors I know in the midst of their own pain, gluing wounds and shutting them together, built empires and raised things out of statistics and royalties. That there were cities burned down and mothers crying their eyes into blindness after losing loved ones who were still able to cherish and love the world amongst their arms. The survivors I know are bold to imagine a world with peace in it, that served their language bent letters to accommodate for our ancestors' songs to be reignited in rooms. The survivors I know have courage to turn their voices into music and their chests into beds for wounded soldiers. The survivors I know do not need you to feel sorry for them, but to recognize their humanity, to understand that their truth lays right here, that they require a moment of silence, to be read in between pages, to be prayed for, to be loved, and to know that they will never stop fighting for what they care of. The survivors I know are different to the ones you read about. Yeah.
Huda and I are the only 2 people who actually have books in the shop today. So when we're talking about poetry slams, we're talking about Slam Your Poetry, Write a Revolution. And you want to hold up your book there. This is Huda's first book, Introducing Me. So
I'm
you
good
can
at promoting stuff.
have a look at that post-event. Can we hear a bit of your work, Sami?
Well, after that.
Stop it.
That was, you should let me go first. I don't know what, because I've got, like, I can read fiction out or I can do a stand-up bit. And I thought I'd just do stand-up.
Stand-up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on.
Because, like, because you were talking about Ukraine at the start, and I find it fascinating because like I hardly hear about Ukraine. Like no one talks about Ukraine anymore. And it's crazy because there's a war on. There's an actual war happening right now. No, like Will Smith could slap Zelensky and nobody would care right now. How is that? How are we there? And you know it's a real war. Like it's an actual war because both sides are white. No, think right. When white people are involved, it's a war. Like it's a war. When brown people fight, like we don't get war. We get conflict. We get at worst, like if we start cutting off some heads, we get crisis. But we never get war, right? Like all the great wars were white. Like World War I, that was a white war. World War II, Star Wars, that's white. That is white. If he had been Anakin Shah, like that would have been the Tatooine conflict at best. Like they've made a movie out of every white guy in that. Han Solo got a movie. Anakin Skywalker's got one. Luke's every white guy. Nothing for Chewbacca. Like nothing. Nothing for the brown guy. You know Chewbacca's brown because he's got a hairy back. No one understands his accent, and he's always driving the Millennium Falcon, which is the Uber of the spaceways, and that's stand-up, I guess.
You're hilarious. No, you're good.
Thank you.
It's interesting that you point out Star Wars because I always respected James Earl Jones, the voice of Darth Vader,
But
right?
we don't see him.
But then he takes the mask off and it's an old white guy that nobody's ever seen. You'd be like, hold on, what about James? Hold on. Okay, can you share something with us, Felix?
Okay. It's intimidated. I will read a passage from my novel, Orang-Orang West Timor. It was translated by John McGlynn. Oh, he's there. Hi. And okay, a little context. We from eastern part of Indonesia, we always feel that we always looked as if you black, you are stupid, unless you can prove that you are not. So in my writing, I try to do sebaliknya. The difference, like in eastern part of Indonesia, we all also have some stereotype things about Javanese. That thing is not known by the Javanese. We always said, and yeah, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. So I write that in my novel. This is there's a character named Tante Yuli. Her son want to be a priest, but Tante Yuli don't like it because he don't want her son to be poor and to live a bad life. And then he shared his story her story with a character named Sylvie. So Tante Yuli said, I just didn't want that kind of life for him. Yuli was started from her thoughts by Tante Yuli's voice. What if, Tante Yuli said, what if he were assigned to serve in difficult place, somewhere deep inside Sumatra or Kalimantan or Java? Oh, gracious. But that wouldn't be so bad, Tante, Sylvie said to her. Kalimantan is developed now, Sumatra too, and Java even more so. Develop, you say? The woman curtly interjected. Emilia said to me in a letter, oh, Mama, don't believe what people say. What you see on television is nonsense. The Javanese are more... Tante Yuli suddenly feels silent as if realizing that what she had been about to say might be seen as a criticism, and she more carefully began to choose her words. The Javanese are, well, let's say they are less fortunate than we. Sylvie now looked confused, causing Tante Yuli to pause and then look around as if to make sure no one else was present. You still don't understand? She asked. All right, I will speak honestly just with you, she said with a whisper. but this is just between the two of us. Now, I don't mean to insult anyone, but Emilia told me that people in Java are much poorer than people here. Much poorer and less civilized besides. Some don't even know how to speak properly. There are many homeless there who live under bridges. There are people who sit in rivers. There are people who eat human flesh to find supernatural powers. Just imagine that, just imagine that. Frightening, isn't it? The look of disgust on Tante Yuli's face caused Sylvie to laugh. Oh, that is it.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Amazing.
We will have some time for questions, but I also want to know, was there kind of an inciting moment for you that you went, I must speak, I must be an artist, I must, I mean, I can think about it for myself, where I was on stage and then, instead of being cast in the lead, they asked me if I wanted the roles of Janitor 1, Janitor 2, or the Indian guy. And that's when I went, okay, I'm not Indian, but I realized that, my this, and this would never actually be shared if I didn't come out with it myself. And just wondering, was there a moment for each of you that said, I have to get my work out there, or else be, I guess, relegated to being a stereotype, and I have to actually combat those stereotypes through my voice. Sami?
I don't know if there was one about being a stereotype, but there's a defining moment in my life about making things, about making art. And it's, I've talked about it before, and I was a journalist in Pakistan, and I used to be in 2006, 2007, which is when Pakistan was experiencing the blowback from the war on terror, and we had almost a suicide bombing every day almost at one point, and I was working in the field as a reporter and a news producer, and Benazir Bhutto, who was the Pakistani Prime Minister at one point, she had returned from exile in 2008, and her convoy was making its way through the streets of Karachi. Millions of people were there to greet her, and I was covering the arrival, and two suicide bombers attacked her, and she survived that, but 150 people died. And I was the first news producer, reporter, news person on the scene. And when I got there, I survived the attack because I just stepped away 10 minutes before to get an interview. So when the explosions happened, I ran back, and I was surrounded by carnage. It was absolutely the worst thing I've ever seen. I had booked an auditorium to do stand-up comedy in that was supposed to be happening 2 days later. I booked the auditorium a month before. I used to do stand-up comedy in Pakistan. You book an auditorium, and it happens in Pakistan a lot back then, where you've got a show coming up, terrorist attack happens, you cancel the show, for whatever, safety, security, and out of respect. And I was standing there, and I'm covering this tragedy, and at the same time, a part of me is thinking, because obviously I'm a narcissist, so a part of me is thinking, I got to cancel the show in 2 days. It's a stand-up comedy show. I can't do stand-up comedy after 150 people in Karachi have just died in a suicide attack. And I then thought, no, why? That's not fair. Why do they get to win? Why do they get to constantly tell us when we cannot laugh, when we cannot listen to poetry, when we cannot work in literature, whatever? Why do they get to decide through terrorism what we can and cannot do? And so I sent a message out to everyone who bought tickets and said, look, I'll be there. I know it's not safe, and I know it might not be appropriate to do comedy after something like this, but I'll be there. If you want to come, come. And 200 people turned up, and we did a show, and I threw out the entire show I was supposed to do, which was just observational stuff about pants are tight or whatever. And instead I talked about the terrorist attack, and I did comedy about terrorism, about making fun of the terrorists and things. And it was the most connected show I've ever had. And it was the show that kind of defined for me, 1 year into doing comedy, that I will always do this, and it matters to me. And I've kind of always done it. I've never had odds like that. Like the stakes are a lot lower now. But that was the time when I kind of realized this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Yeah.
Huda?
I actually had two very separate moments that came a lot later than people thought in my career. I've been doing poetry, spoken word for 8 years, now. And I'm an accidental poet. I used to MC events. I worked at a university. I'm an academic. I teach. And I remember being at this event where I was emceeing and I was just talking. And one of my good friends now was featuring, my name is Anissa Nandala, who's a African-Australian poet. And after I got off stage, she was like, man, you're an awesome poet. And I was like, I wouldn't call what I'm doing poetry, but cool. Like, thanks for the compliment. And I never labeled what I did as anything. Like, I just spoke. When I first made my first Facebook page, poetry, my bio was, I talk a lot and some call it poetry, so I'll take it. That was the bio of my page. So there was no labeling of anything. My first moment actually came after I won nationals. And I had a second mom who raised me in Cairo, Egypt, and we used to live in this 1-bedroom apartment. My mom had built a bed out of cement. There was a dent in the wall, and my mom bought more cement and built this bed, and her best friend had flown in and fled another country, and we were all living in this really small apartment, and she was like my second mom. And when we were refugees in Australia, it happened so that she also came to Australia. And we've been very distant. We haven't seen her in a long time. And she's got a beautiful daughter who's 14. Last time I saw her, she was like a fetus, child. And when I won, she called and she was talking to my mom. And I was like, man, I haven't seen you in years. I really would like to catch up, da-da-da. And she goes, I actually want to come once you release your book. And I was like, I didn't even know you knew that I was writing a book. And she goes, funny enough, my daughter is a huge fan of your work. And she watched you on YouTube, and she has all your videos, and she goes, Mom, when I grow up, I want to be like Huda. And that's my second mom, and now having her child look up to me and go, oh my God, there is another woman who looks like me doing this stuff, right? And it was like a solidifying moment of not that I did it for anybody else, but subconsciously I was doing it for other women who look like me, who were watching me when I didn't even know how to find my own videos on YouTube. So I was like, how are you finding it? And so it was a strange, and then the other moment was I met an elder from South Africa when I was 23, and I had gotten off stage, and she was like, I have a question for you. And she said, I want you, before you get on stage next and you do poetry, I want you to ask yourself why you speak. And she asked me over and over again, and I was like, there is a necessity to speak. And she goes, but why? Why do you feel that necessity? Why does nobody else in your world feel that urgency that you feel?
Rather than being like a plumber.
Oh, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or like a dope doctor with a blaze, you know
Yeah,
what I'm
exactly,
saying?
yeah.
Why this? And I realized that I have an urgency that goes beyond labeling myself as a poet. I have a spiritual obligation. It sounds so corny, but I have a spiritual obligation to truth. And art is the most truest thing that I know. I think the most purest things that we have left in the world are a child's smile, which radiates just innocence, and art. You cannot bullshit on this page. I mean, you could try, but nobody gonna feel you. You know what I mean? And for me, those moments where I was like, man, I am not doing art, I am art. I am not doing poetry, I am poetry. And that became my internal relationship with this, where I was like, yo, if I get paid nothing and I do it on a corner street and put my hat out to make enough for a meal, I'm gonna do this forever. I'm gonna do it forever because it fuels my being, right? So I'm still discovering that because I don't think I'm as good as people think I am.
Okay.
So I'm working on that.
I'm just going to double check on the time. I want to hear from Felix next on that question. How are we going for time in terms of questioning and all that sort of stuff? Where are we at?
Good. Yeah.
We're still good?
Yep.
Okay, brilliant. Felix, same to you. That defining moment for you that said, I need to speak up. I need to speak out, and writing is my medium.
Okay, I like writing since I was a kid, and then I don't start to write to speak something. Specifically? I just like to write. And then when I was a kid, all the books, all the knowledge is produced in Jakarta. So everything I read is just about Jakarta, Japanese, a little bit Sumatra. And then it takes time to me to understand, to aware of some issue. And then I came to study in East Java, and then I experienced so a lot of racism things, and then a lot of and I start thinking that it's something to do with colonialism and everything, and then yeah, I think I get angry and I just wrote everything down, and if you are from eastern part of Indonesia and you are a writer and you I think if you don't write about it, I think you are not aware enough, because it's everywhere, the racism and everything, it's everywhere. And like just 2-3 years ago, they called Papuan student as monkey, and I think we can start the discussion at that time, but it just disappeared. And then just like 3-4 months ago, the leader of a bigger party in Indonesia, like the incumbent party, she told to the audience, all of them is the Congress, in a party Congress, something like that. Even president is there, and she say that she's now very happy because some people from Papua marry some girl from Javanese, and their kid is so Indonesia. And it's like, what the fuck? Like what is Indonesia? like what is so Indonesia mean? And then yeah, in the university, sometimes if we do some protest, like demonstration, something like that, some professor just say that just get you some Japanese girl to what is it, memperbaiki keturunan, fix your bloodline, something like that. And wow. It was like, wow, thank you very much for. But we don't really realize that, like we don't even know what is racism is. So to understand that, it takes time. It takes time. Like we experience it every day, but we don't really we don't know that name. Like for my friends. For my friends, I think so many friends of me, they don't even know about that. Like maybe we are what they talk that we are, and then they are just like ghost insecurity, something like that. And then I think when I start to write my novel, I start to aware about those things, and I start to write about it.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. So I'm sure some hands are going to shoot up from the audience here. There's some questions that we can share with you right away.
All the way in the back.
Yep, all the way up the back, yeah. Yes, we'll get you a microphone so the audio can be recorded, and then you can be found.
This mic is on the whole time.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
The number of you three is not many. Later on, whoever, whatever, however, people might change. What about you? That's one. Number two, when what you have said just now is all the background, what you have right now. And then next, is there anything else that you haven't said that will keep you on the track with this great spirit comparing racism with the creative practices? Thank you.
That's a great question. I did not catch the first one.
What was the first question? Well, we'll answer the second one. Yeah,
Cool.
just one question. Is that okay? So what moves you what moves you forward? Yeah.
Everybody's looking at me. Okay, cool.
Okay, we'll
All right.
start with
Like,
you.
I was
You
like, somebody else is gonna answer
you
the question.
opened your mouth.
I was like, great question.
Yeah, great question.
I'm not saying nothing no more.
We'll do one question.
So my call to action is actually like I'm in the process of writing my autobiography, and I'm really big on what I verbalize and then have the audacity to imagine. I'd like to have the audacity to create what I imagine. And since I'm a black woman, I am not waiting for anybody to create the safety I require. So I'm going to make it happen. So my call to action is actually I'm writing my autobiography, which is my story. But the next part is I'm actually doing a crowdfunding to raise money to go on tour and meet black poets globally. And I'm running a podcast called The Vault QLD, which is the expression and the stories of BIPOC people around the world, where I'm gonna sit with artists and have a conversation about is it possible in our lifetime to decolonize art? And what does that look like? And what steps have you taken as the marginalized community to make that happen? Because I think when we talk about having the conversation, we're not connecting to have the conversation to give it the mass that it has, right? So if the whole world starts to talk and artists from here, from South Africa start to talk, there is a magnitude and power to that I want to give the stage to. That's my first call to action. The second one is I'm actually going to write a book while I'm on tour of these stories of people that I'm going to meet, right? I'm going to write a book about, is it possible to decolonize poetry? What does it mean to be inclusive of people that look like me in the room, right? And then my third call to action is actually filming that process of a year of world travel and documenting the stories of vigorous people in the art industry and what they're doing to decolonize art. My job in the next 2 years as an educator doing my master's on cultural competency is I'm going to show you how messed up this is. You say you want to help, go ahead. I am your first call to action. Let me go out there and get the content, write the book, feature poets. Let's have the first BIPOC Writers Festival where everyone is a person of color, and let's see what that looks like. That's my call to action. Will people back me? We'll see. We'll see.
Sami, did you want to tackle that question? What next?
I have a daughter. I'm 13-year-old daughter. I'm 44 years old. For me, most of my call to action is how do I pay my rent?
I'm struggling with that too.
Welcome
Anybody want to help with rent?
Yeah. But that is a big part of it, and there's no reason to be a writer or a comedian other than you can't not be one. Like there's, I've been a journalist. I have a job part-time at Melbourne University as well, but I have been offered jobs that pay well, but I keep saying no because I need to have time to write. The writing will never pay well. 1% of every writer ends up earning lots of money. For every Stephen King or whoever, there's like 1 million writers who are working 5 jobs and also writing their books. I like writing because I like telling stories. I like stand-up because I like, talking about things that are in my head. My motivation is always to just, if I have an idea, I can't not chase it. It's just the way I've got to train my brain. So if I have an idea, I either write a story about it or do it in stand-up or something, but I got to follow it and see where it goes. And if I'm lucky, it'll pay me enough money to pay rent for next month. And then hopefully there's an idea after that.
So I got to put rent on my bucket list.
That's right, on the top.
I've got a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old who are here today, and I was asked to do a TED Talk, which was specifically about how you tell your children about racism. Because, it's a very difficult kind of thing where what's the access point? Do you wait for something to happen, or do you kind of preempt it and hope you don't create a chip on their shoulder preemptively? And so it's kind of for me, that's my next motivation is how I create space for my kids to hopefully, I have to live in a pretty diverse community because I'm in like Marrickville in Sydney. And, at one point we looked at moving to a little cottage in the bush, which I'd always dreamed about doing. And we looked at the school, and it was 30 kids, K to 12, all white. And I thought, ooh, that's a big investment to move your whole life, get a house, do all that stuff, and then take the risk of having your brown children in that community. And I guess that's my thought is like, how do we tell our children that they can be hated for being born brown? I mean, sorry to my daughter who's in the audience now, but it is a reality.
Damn it, Dad.
It is a reality that we have to figure out the self-esteem and the resilience and all those sorts of things that we can empower our children with. And that's, I think is a motivator. How about for yourself? What's your next move in terms of combating racism as our questioner has asked?
I don't really know. I love to write. I already try another job. I even built my own alcohol business. But then I came back to write, and then I just give it to the community. And then I think I will write for the rest of my life. And then I will try to discuss that issue with people. And also, yeah, thanks to Ubud Writers Festival to bring this issue up. Like, we don't ever talk about racism. Like, we always say that, we don't do racism, but then it's everywhere. We have to start to talk about it, and then to figure it out, like how to solve it, and then how to send our kids to the school, and then told them that maybe you will have this because you're just a kid, and then, but yeah, that's a difficult
It is,
question
it's a challenge.
And
I want to add one more motivation, which you brought up right now, is I want to create something, write something, so I can come back here again and again, because
Listen to me. The
wait,
view. Oh my
this
God.
has ruined writers' festivals for me. Like any other
Globally.
writers' festival, I'm like, I don't want to be. I'll go to Ubud. Forget it. Like, yeah.
You
I'm
don't
gonna
wanna
go.
What about,
Definitely. Yeah.
you're not thinking like the Geelong Writers Festival?
Yeah. Don't even call me.
Nothing's the same anymore.
Yeah.
We had other questions, yes?
Yep.
I would just like to start off by expressing my offence at you guys being very racist and mocking the white man. I've looked around the room and gone, I'm a real minority here. It's easy to punch down, isn't it, guys?
Welcome to my life.
A lot of respect for you guys and the message you're spreading. This question's for everyone, but to Sami's point about the sort of two different groups, I guess, or buckets, and there's more than that, of racists in somewhere like Australia and the country kind of bogan style versus your inner city Marrickville and Fitzroy North. And I think the sort of where my mind is blown is sitting at dinner parties in inner city Sydney or Melbourne, and I just am interested in where we've agreed, I guess, collectively that politicians aren't the people worth talking to, where I guess a message to the woke movement, the inner city, might be missing the mark, perhaps.
So, I think part of it is, look, we aren't appreciative of things getting better. And I know because no, that's not cool.
Absolutely.
It's just not cool. But, you know, the life, like when I remember when Obama he'd been talking about racism in America, and he said, it is terrible, but it's still better than it was 10 years before, and like that. And so that is one of the things. I was listening to a really interesting interview with a historian, Peter Frankopan, and he wrote a book of the New Silk Road and stuff, and he was talking about how, he's like, there is so much wrong with the world right now, not denying that, but there's more clean drinking water in the world than there's ever been before. And that's something to appreciate even for a moment. There's 1,000 things wrong with how we got there, but that is something still to appreciate. I do think, for example, that the life I have in Australia now, I've spoken to Pakistanis and Indians and stuff who came to Australia in the 70s and 80s and stuff. Very different from what I have now. And my daughter is going to have an even better, even more open and included life in the Australia she grows up in. So I think that's one thing. We need to, sometimes, it's not cool, no one likes doing it, but it's worth doing. But at the same time, like I said, I like having the conversations, and the problem I have, for example, with people, inner city people from the left who are always well-meaning, is they don't like having the conversations because they don't like feeling that they are just as flawed as anyone else. The whole message of I'm not racist, so therefore why are we having this conversation? Or you're racist, but I'm not, so you're a bad person. I don't buy that ever. I never do. I never think I am a terrible human being in 1,000 different levels, and so are you. And I'd much rather talk about how honest that is so we can get better together than anytime you say anything, oh, you're racist, stop talking. Who does that help? We've seen from the way the world politics shifts now, the more you tell people not to have conversations openly and honestly, the more they shift towards the dark parts of the world, the dark parts of the internet, and manifest in something like Trump or whatever getting to power. So yeah.
I also think in Australia, it's become really trendy to be fake woke, whatever the hell that means, right? Like everybody's on the trend of like, I'm so political and I know exactly what's going on, but that hits a really quick wall, right? Like people are like, I'm not racist, but they don't actually know what that means. Like deeply, because racism, like for most people living in Australia, considering the history it has, I am inherently racist by being there. meaning every single action that I do is a conscious decision to unpack the racism that this system has given me, right? So there's a conversation to be had about me removing my internalized racism towards myself as a black person, then how that portrays to other BIPOC communities, how that translates into social conversations, right? Then social action, and then how that needs to get to higher people. Otherwise, we're just having this vault of bullshit. Right? Like, it's really cool that we can all sit here and agree, oh my God, racists are bad people, right? Yeah, nodding, cool. What does that mean?
But
For
also,
people like me, means nothing, right? Like, for me,
and not just that, like, but also, like, let's be honest, all of our parents have some racism in them.
oh, facts.
I joke about my dad.
My mom's Arab.
Yeah, my dad is
Yes.
Pakistani. He makes Pauline Hanson look woke. Like, it is, racists are bad people, but if they are they irredeemable? Because what does that say about my dad? What does that say about me? I'm probably racist about 1,000 different things.
But this is the interesting conversation,
Yeah.
right? People see racism as like, if I get labeled at it, that's it. I'm forever that and cannot be redeemable in the sense of like, you can come to that conclusion on your own before you do something that can cancel you. Like, that's a choice you can unpack on your own. And I think as BIPOC people, we're like, government is always against us. And I get it, they definitely are, right? But there needs to be a push against that, because we're not gonna have a change that allows for a better tomorrow if the conversation only exists here. If there is nobody up top, and I'm talking about literature freedom and like grants written specifically for black people, BIPOC people to write books, funding to celebrate them, and also have them go on tours. That cannot happen when the art community is all a bunch of people trying to figure out how to pay rent. Like, that's not gonna move. Like, and it's just legitimate. People need to step up and be a part of the conversation. So I agree with you. Like, make them very uncomfortable. Get them in the room and be like, yeah, come on. Now there's like 100 people against you. Make that money happen. Let's go. Get me paid.
Well, I mean, it makes me think that racism is so much more about status and how, if you want to feel at a higher status, you've got to find someone nearby that you can see as a lower status. And that kind of relational status, and you see that with people who are on lower incomes in the United States and in Australia and elsewhere who go, well, I'm definitely at the bottom of the rung, but at least there's some brown people around that I can be better than, right? I mean, that's sometimes the feeling,
Miles,
right?
relax.
Sorry. I mean, that's definitely what Trump played into, right? Is that kind of, we are the downtrodden, let's all kind of look at the people around us and figure out how we can be better than them. And I feel like, that sometimes is also, it's lateral as well, lateral violence. I know within black culture there's skin tone. Within Indian culture there's skin tone, there's caste systems, there's that whole system, which isn't necessarily about race or color, it's about class, right? There's a lot of what we're talking about as well. It's that extra layer. Any other questions? Yeah, just here. Or, yep.
Is it my grants?
First of all, thank you so much for all the panelists. It was such a great discussion. I want to ask about what other media other than art, literature, and news outlet, because like in Indonesia, like Felix said, we have so much oppression, and censorship in literature, talking about race, religion, and tribe. And for example, like last month, we have like an Indonesian doing a blackface on social media because of the Little Mermaid trailer coming. And it was on all the news outlet, and I thought it was going to be like the catalyst of this conversation is going to be going on social media about racism in Indonesia, but it does not happen. So what other method that we can do to start the conversation in Indonesian youth especially? Yeah, thank you.
Question. Felix.
That is, I hope every one of us, what you can do, what your way, just do it and start the conversation. I don't really believe the movie, in the film, you can see that all the bad people is black and curly and have accent and they're from eastern part of Indonesia. That's black people in Indonesian movie. After this time, they are always coming.
American movies.
Just
We have it in every movie, it's okay.
Oh, yeah, okay, great. Thank you very much.
They don't like us anywhere.
So I just want to say that you are a great people. You have your own environment. You have your own work. Just do something about it, and then I think it will be better for Indonesia or for the world. I don't know. Yeah.
I'm not from here, but I give you the context of like, I mentor young black students and African diaspora in Australia. My first source of action was to actually have them be empowered and involved and acknowledge themselves. I think the conversation starts much later as a reactionary thing of like the causality of racism. Let's get people bandaged up once racism is hit. What I actually do is I have a room called Black Excellence, and we talk about brotherhood, right? So my young black men talk about masculinity and blackness and culture and reigniting language. And we have sessions that are young BIPOC kids must learn who they are versus what the world wants them to believe they are. And the conversation starts by teaching them who they are. Not what the world wants them to be, not the presentation of the world wants them to be. So that when they go outside, they learn how to differentiate and go, that's not who I am. And a lot of people don't know how to call I'm don't know what it's called, the name of it, because they haven't been taught who they are. They've lived their whole life trying to prove that I'm not a savage, that I'm not unintelligent, that I'm worthy, that I'm this. But we haven't given them the foundational basis of this is who you are. If you hear anything that opposes that, that is not who you are, right? So then you can come at that conversation without the reaction, but the positioning into who you are. So there has to be a space cultivated to teach youth. You are culture, tradition, language, resilience, revolutions. You are heartbeats. You are everything the world needs to move. You are soil, water, and earth. You are everything. Teach them that. So when the world gives them another image, they refuse to take it on. Because you cannot convince somebody who is soul in themselves, I'm the goddess. You can't tell me otherwise. It's undefeated. You can argue with me for the rest of your life. But I've had that whispered into my ear since birth. You know what I mean? And when we start to echo what you are, and this is just humanity, remind people of the soul affirmation of who you are and who you exist as, so that they can combat this world with the most authentic, undefeated existence. And that's what we need to do.
Yeah. I actually think being in this room is what we can do, right? This is ephemera. This doesn't happen over and over again. This is not a document. Yes, there's a video and somebody may watch it later. But how often are we leaving the great streaming that is available since lockdown, right? I mean, how often are we we competing with Netflix, really, to get into this room and look at other humans eye to eye and experience something in the moment where you're seeing a real human being that hasn't been edited, hasn't been Snapchatted, hasn't been Photoshopped. There's no kind of two-dimensionality to this exchange. And I would go further to say that there shouldn't even be a stage and lights on us. It should be an open forum, because each of you, I'm sure, has ideas and thoughts and things that you do with your lives, and there's no reason why we're more important than you are. And so creating more spaces for social forums that are like this. So big, congratulations to Ubud Writers Festival for putting this topic on, and for also creating this space where hopefully each of you have a conversation after this that says, I've got this idea and this is what I thought, because that's why this reality that we're sitting in right now is so much more valuable than the document, the video, the archive, the book, whatever it is. That little piece of paper is not as valuable as a human life. And here we are, share with each other, post this event, have a coffee, have a drink, whatever you want to do. Buy this book. Buy this book.
Buy my book. I'm broke, okay? I have no money.
Listen to The Mist on Audible. Definitely check out Felix's next novel. We are winding up this session now. We've probably got a minute, two. Okay, go on. Yep, one last question.
Okay. Elon Musk just bought Twitter today.
Yes.
He sacked everybody.
Yes.
And conversation is the guy who was on the other day said is the foundation of democracy. Without conversation, you start getting into violence. He's going to change it. He's going to put Elon Musk back on. He's going to put Donald Trump back on, and presumably get rid of any moderation. So what do you think about that?
Ooh.
Yeah,
But
well,
then
I mean, I think...
also at the same time, like it was owned by a Saudi prince with a massive share in it prior to Elon Musk. I mean, there's always been the spaces, like social media spaces, at the end of the day, they're tech companies and they're owned by dickbags, and they always have been,
Yeah.
and
Facts.
they always will be. But the moderation was happening in America. So, for example, Trump was kicked off, but Ayatollah Khamenei from Iran was still on there and is still issuing all his fatwas and his edicts and everything while a revolution is going on in Iran that we should be supporting. And I spent years getting death threats from all kinds of Islamic extremists on there, and not one of them was ever blocked. So these are American tools.
He's extreme free speech.
I'm extreme free speech. I don't mind. I would much rather a free speech zone where everyone gets to talk than one which is curated by Americans who think that their politics is the only one that matters.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day,
Oh,
but
the
you
worst.
know.
They're like categories of racist. They're up there.
But yeah, if we lose Twitter, probably good.
Yeah.
And I say that someone who's been very active on Twitter for a very long time, but there'll be something else horrendous. The printing press changed the world, and a lot of people died when it did. And right now, social media is having the same effect. We don't know where it'll lead, but we do know that the people in charge of it right now aren't great, and they will not be for a long time.
And Twitter can be cancelled as well. It can absolutely lose credibility if it doesn't have, if it has the Elon Musk and the Donald Trump voices as a priority. I think hopefully people who are a little bit more woke will be like, okay, Twitter is irrelevant. If we can make it relevant, I think it would be great. But yeah.
I think the question around free speech is always intriguing, right? Like, I always say this, like, if you should have the right to say what, this is my own personal relief as a black woman. If you get to say whatever you want, I get to punch you for every stupid thing you say. Every stupid, just right knock on the mouth, right? But in the essence of free speech, as a black woman who's been in a lot of different types of racist environments, I kind of like to know my enemy first and foremost. I want to know who you are. And social media has this thing where people are very bold, and you get to know your enemy firsthand. Because they're bold, right? They're going to say everything they're thinking out there. And I want to be able to point the asshole right there. Because to me, I can identify the places that I'm in, but there's also a very dangerous conversation when we allow everyone to say whatever they want, and that can trickle people, that can trigger people, that can harm people. Words have the power to heal.
Without physically seeing the reaction of that person as well. Like
So
you
you can
bully
say
somebody on the
whatever you
playground.
want. Yep.
Yeah, you bully someone in the playground and they
There's a
cry.
risk of me knocking you the hell out.
Yeah.
But if you say it on social media, I can block you and you can make a whole different account. And there is definitely, like, we don't want to censor people. There is a sense of, like, as an artist, I hate being censored. I don't want people to tell me what I can say. But there is a caution and a responsibility with language because it can incite revolutions and things to move forward. And when people have the echo chamber of all races being able to unify themselves and agree and come together and be co-signed under the principle of freedom of speech, that can also be very dangerous. So I'm wary that you can unify people for say it so we know it. But what happens when all the people who say it are the people who have the power and the money, and now they get the ability to say it and do it? What happens to us?
Yeah.
When all the racist people are rich, in power, in charge, and can say whatever they want under that principle, and all we can do is be mad at them at a comment section.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it gets to a point where now we're unifying power of racism and enabling it to exist as an echo chamber everywhere. So I think freedom of speech can be really, really dangerous. If not, this is why I say, like, stupid people are the most dangerous people in the world. Because they're bold about being stupid. Like, they'll say it with their chest. Smart people like, oh, I don't want to be condescending. Oh, I'll chill out. Stupid people like, nah, I hate all black people everywhere. Get rid of them. You know what I mean? It's a two-sided coin, but I see the point you're making.
You can definitely take some of Huda home with you in the introducing me. If you want to know more about poetry slams, or someone came up to me and was like,
I've got a slam at 6 p.m., so I got to go
definitely.
anyways.
Okay. So check out the poetry slam tonight as well. Huda will be featuring there. Give our panelists a round of applause, please.